Here we go. Microaggressions are a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance or of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as racial or ethnic minorities. So these are terms that may be used tonight that you might not have a familiarity with, but I just want to throw those out so that we know what's going on. So after Ricky and the board started talking about doing this panel, I was a little hesitant to do it, but then I found a quote that solidified me wanting to do this and got me fired up. And I've shared it with Dr. Baker. I think she enjoyed it too. But it's a quote by Sherry Faye Rosendahl. And it says, "The only thing that should come after 'I'm not a racist, but' but racism is so ingrained in my society and culture that on some level I definitely am and need to do my part to destroy the system of oppression that people like me have created and benefit from on the daily." And that, if you're true and honest with yourself and you hear that quote and don't exactly understand what it says, you're not looking at yourself in a true light. And so that is really what made me want to start this conversation and let our Black coaches really hammer it home for us to let us learn. There are so many other inclusionary things that we can talk on, whether it be our Black or Brown athletes of color, LGBTQIAA plus issues, or even international students. But tonight, I really just want to focus on our Black and Brown athletes of color and how they might see a campus differently than what a white athlete does. So we're going to get into the panel discussion part, which is what everybody came here for and not to hear me talk. So the first question that was sent in by our coaching body is, what are some common misconceptions about Black athletes or teams from HBCUs? So panel, who wants to take that one first? Glenn smiling.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much to unpack with that particular question around misconceptions about HBCUs. I would say that our teams, I just served on a panel with other HBCU coaches across the country on last week. And one thing that I recognized immediately in having these conversations is that people do lump us and clump us in the same sort of, that y'all are stump and shake, or you are, that's what you do and that's just what you need to do, or y'all are gonna slay the dance, or it's never the other stuff, like you're gonna slay your tumbling, your pyramid, your group stunt, like, right? So it's always these, as I sit in my position, what people have seen on the outside. And one of the things that I always say to people when we start to talk about diversity and inclusion is that we need to adapt a salad bowl mentality and not a melting pot mentality. And that mentality is one that does not meld everyone together, right? In New Orleans, we cook gumbo. And one of the things about how you know your gumbo is really good is that all of the ingredients, it starts to come together and it all starts to just look the same, right? But that's not what this is, right? We are individuals. Black folks in general are individuals. We come with our diverse group of perspectives and lenses on the world, whether that's religion, whether that's language, whether that's cooking, right? Dr. Baker, I always laugh. She called me and said, teach me that recipe about red beans, right? Because she's from where I'm at right now, actually in Ohio. But she had to ask me that. But, you know, these are things that we have to start to wrap our head around, is how do we start to look at people as an individual across past race, right?
I'm just listening to a Zoom for a little bit.
I'm sorry?
I apologize. I wasn't on mute.
Okay, no. So we start to look at, similar to how we need to start to look at people as individuals, we need to look at our programs as individuals as well. Xavier University of Louisiana, for instance, is not a stump and shake team. You won't see us doing a stump and shake routine, right? But we will give you that powerhouse tumbling. We will give you those elite level pyramids and baskets and stuff that we see at the other traditional levels. And I think as you all begin to navigate sort of your own lens, it's going to be really important that our coaches, our administrators, we start to broaden our lens, because when you start to look at people as one, you're missing some of those attributes that are so critical to their identity.
Anybody else have anything to add on that?
I'll just add a bit of perspective. So much of my research as a sport management scholar has been on the Black student athlete experience. And so what we know is that we see microaggressions taking place in various spaces on campus. So when we're talking about competition, I actually was just listening in on a call last week with some of the NAIA athletic directors, and one of the participants asked a question specifically around the officials in basketball and seeing how calls were made different for HBCU schools, or language that was used to describe HBCU schools or teams that have more students of color on those teams. And so some of those other microaggressions may not come, it may not be these overt pieces of, when I see you at a setting, at a competition, this is what happens, but it happens in our language, the words that we use to describe. So, sports like cheer and dance, and I am 100%, we had a really great thread going in our panel email. I was not a cheerleader or a dancer, and I haven't coached. So I really think the coaches have much better perspective in terms of what it's like from a coaching and competition standpoint. But when we think about sports like cheer and dance, where appearance, where performance is measured and scored in a different way, right? In basketball, it's like, does the ball go in or does it not? However, you have these other calls. Was that a foul? Was that a travel? Was that foul overly aggressive? And so when you take these experiences and these perspectives into a cheer space or a dance space, the appearance of our athletes matter. What their hair looks like, what their makeup looks like, what their uniform, how it fits. What we all know is that there are a variety of body types. But what we know about students of color, particularly when we talk about Black women and girls, that their bodies are in some way shaped different or fit different in a uniform. And so, I know Glenn can probably jump in on this, because we share an office space. He also has the cheer uniforms in there. And so when the girls are being fitted and trying them on, we have to think a little bit more about what it looks like in the back, because their skirts fit different. Fits different if you have hips, if you have, thicker thighs, whatever it may be. And so when we look at how appearance matters in sports like this, and how uniformity looks, right? And one of the things that we've talked about just within our own scope is, when you're looking at scoring and the ways in which things that are tangible, right? I can tell you, and again, my language isn't always great with cheer and dance. But if you do a certain type of tumble, there's points for that, right? But the facial expressions, those things matter. The energy that you have, the demeanor you have, all of those things matter. And sometimes bias really impacts the ways in which students of color are judged, measured, scored, whatever it may be, in whatever level of competition. So I wanted to kind of add that piece as well, of where bias tends to become apparent in the spaces like a cheer and a dance, as well as other sports that we see across the country.
Also to add to that, I'm sorry, Doc, I think I would be remiss if I didn't add this part of it. Doc and I, we do a lot of, and I call Dr. Ashley Baker Doc. We just work so closely together. Sometimes I can't say Dr. Ashley Baker, it's too long. But we work in a space where we facilitate implicit bias trainings. We do trainings across our campus. We are in a network and a cohort of social justice advocates across the state and our city. So we're doing this work all the time. And one of the things that me being a man, I recognize is that one, sometimes I have to decrease my man and increase somebody else who might know a little better. So Doc, I'll say, Doc, look, go over to Doc and put that skirt on and see if it's working for you. Because I, as a man, I don't have that perspective, right? That's not my lens on the world. My lens on the world is being a gay Black man navigating this world. And that's my lens that I bring. And even that bias, although I am a part of these target identities, and we talk target, non-target identities, meaning sort of these minority pieces that I bring, right? Being a gay man, I'm a minority. Being a Black gay man, I'm definitely a minority, right? So these things are ever flowing, and I can still be biased because those things are not mutually exclusive to how I carry myself in this world. So it's incumbent of all of us as coaches to realize when we don't have these lived, shared experiences around race, around culture, around gender, around all these other things that sort of make us that make up our identity, that one, either we can call on other people who have that identity to help us through and navigate, or we can sit and listen to those who have those identities and see the impact of their daily practices as they navigate the world.
You know, as a young coach, to piggyback off of you, Glenn, I didn't ever think about the male gaze as, you know, uniforms, you know, what my kids look like and how that could affect their mental health, their time on the squad, what they're doing. And so after having a couple of conversations with kids, I really started to look at what my female athletes were going through with if they were wearing a crop top or something that was off the shoulder or something like that. And, you know, like you said, really, I believe that a lot of the world right now doesn't want to actively listen. And I think that's a problem with everybody. We're so quick to throw our opinions on someone else's opinion instead of actively listening to what they are telling us and asking them questions about that. And so perfectly hit the nail on the head. We have our experiences, but what we need to do is listen and share these experiences with everybody else. Does anybody do any of my panelists have anything else about the common misconceptions on how maybe sometimes Black athletes are seen in a PWI institution or in cheer and dance? Because we can roll right into the next point, which is kind of what Dr. Baker covered. And we're going to talk about, and I want each panelist to kind of like think about something on this one. What are some common microaggressions that you have faced being a Black or brown athlete in cheer or dance? Like, what is something common that you have had that just hits you wrong in your head that maybe a white coach or someone not of your race has said to you, a studio owner, a teacher? If any of you have any examples or know of anything.
Dax, I have an example that I feel like it took me a while to really like accept it and come to terms with how I handled it as well. So I can remember being in high school and there was multiple like small microaggressions that you hear like, oh, you're the fastest one running on your team. It's because you're Black. Like, no, it's because I work really hard at being physically fit. But one that stood out to me most, especially as I look back as an adult, is we did theme days for cheer practice. And one week in the summer, my junior year, my coach decided we were going to have like a ghetto theme day. So you had to dress ghetto. And I came to my coach right after practice the day before this event. I said, I'm not comfortable with this event. One is a stereotype. What is a ghetto person supposed to dress like? And I'm just not comfortable at all participating. And, you know, instead of taking time to reflect on it or, you know, seeking some other perspective, her response was, well, then you're not being a team player. You're not being a leader who's been on this team for 3 years, and you should participate. So the following day, I still really had a conviction about it. I felt strongly. I don't really know at the time, like, why I felt so strongly about it. I just knew it wasn't right. So the day went on, and I ended up being the only person dressed in normal practice clothes, and other people were dressed in like whatever they assumed to be ghetto attire. And just looking back at it as a coach now with a different perspective as an adult, it was unacceptable. Like, that's a microaggression, and that's a stereotype that should never occur and never be instilled in our student athletes, especially minor student athletes who you don't know their background, you don't know their experiences.
I know I was choreographing in a gym back in the South, and this has been 10 plus years ago. And I was just talking to a friend of mine that cheered at Kentucky, who's been a longtime judge for varsity and jam brands. And I was kind of asking him, what topic should I touch on? And he was like, coaches thinking that their only little black girls should be the point jumper and the point dancer because they can do so much. As an ally to people of color, you have to step in and have that uncomfortable conversation that's like, what you did was stupid. And I applaud you for standing up to your coach for having a ghetto day. I'm sure it was just a bunch of white girls with bandanas wrapped around their head and braids.
You got it.
Okay. Because apparently that's what little white girls think that ghetto is hold on. I mean, they probably got one of these and wrapped it around their head and put their hair in 2 braids.
Yes.
Okay.
A couple baggy outfits.
With one sock up, one sock down, trying to be LL Cool J. Okay.
Exactly.
And that's stupid to me. Do any of my other panelists, I want you to speak your truth because this needs to be where the uncomfortable part of this conversation comes in. We need to, okay, Tasha, go ahead. Get it.
I have 2 things. One, I get a lot of, I don't know how many times growing up, because, I was in a semi-diverse but not town growing up, but I don't know how many times I got oh, you're the whitest black person I know, or wow, you speak so well for, you talk like a white person. I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm sorry that I can articulate or I don't, I guess they assume all black people speak ghetto, whatever that even means, but just that would always be a thing. And if anyone found out that I taught dance or what I did, or that I did dance, they automatically assumed it was all hip hop. And so when I'm like, no, I'm trained in all things and I like everything, they're like, oh, really? So you actually took ballet? Yes. So I think that those are the 2 things that have always stuck out to me, that it's just an automatic assumption that, we do hip hop, and that because I sit to myself and I stand up straight and talk however I talk, that it just doesn't add up to what they think it should be. I don't know.
Those two comments and you're pretty for a black girl
Yes.
are the 2 that make me just want to slap the ever-loving hell out of whoever said it. Sorry, guys, I cuss. So if you're offended by cussing, I'm sorry. It may come out. But you're pretty for a black girl, or you talk white, or you're the whitest black person I know. That makes me want to literally slap the hell out of whoever said it, because why do you have to justify that? You're so pretty. You speak well. Why is it so hard? And guys, a little background about me. I come from a small town in Arkansas that's only about 1,400 people. We're, it's predominantly white. We were the next to last school to integrate in Arkansas. And that is something that makes me mad about my town. Little Rock Central, which y'all have all heard of, and my town were the last 2 schools in Arkansas to integrate students. My mom did not go to school with a black or brown person the whole time she was there, and she graduated high school in 1965. This makes me angry that my town did that. So this is one reason that I really have started to engage myself into being more of an ally for black and brown athletes. and that's why I really wanted to do this. Do any of my other panelists have anything that they want to add on this?
I want Ricky, go ahead.
I just want to touch on a situation that happened at Loyola. We had just finished competing in Nebraska at regionals, and we were trying to figure out where to get something to eat, and I was like, well, you know, so there's Cane's, there's Wendy's, and somebody said something else, and one of our white girls said, no, that's in the ghetto. And everybody just turned around and looked, and they're like, why do you say that? She goes, it just looks like it's in the ghetto. And so, you know, everybody just kind of brushed it aside. You know, later on, I just pulled her aside. I said, you know, I said, sometimes you have to watch what you say and how you say it, because it can be very offensive. You know, I understand that you come from Colorado, so this is probably the first time you've been around this many people of color, but you have to think before you speak and how you address people, because it may rub somebody the wrong way. And, you know, as a result of that, I actually had someone in our counseling center at Loyola come in and do a workshop on diversity, inclusion, and racial stereotypes. And, you know, she opened up a huge conversation. There was a lot of dialogue, and our students had these tough conversations. And at the end of it, they're like, you know, Coach Ricky, we never thought about this. Can we please do this again? We've learned so much in this short hour. So, you know, that's something that we're going to do again to keep having those conversations.
Anytime we start to talk about microaggressions, I like to lead off with this quote that one of my colleagues, his name is Matthew Kincaid, he opens up all of his sessions with, and he says that microaggressions are death by 1,000 nicks. And I know I've seen a couple quotes around online saying something similar, because the more that we endure these microaggressions, the more we're cut down, the more that we bruise, right? And if you keep bruising something long enough, something's gonna happen, right? You keep hitting me, I might take it the first, second, third time, but the fourth time, I might explode, right? So I'm saying that before I preface this, because I think my team came up with their own explosion to some sense this year. We would go to places, people would look at us differently. At different competitions. You know, I even had someone comment on a score sheet about their hair, specifically their hair, and how it wasn't a collegiate look. And so I challenged by asking, well, what's a collegiate look? Because I need to know. Well, it's pulled off their face. Well, it is pulled off their face, right? Their hair isn't in their face, it's pulled back. But what they were saying is that a collegiate look wasn't natural hair. Really, that's what we're getting down to after probing and asking all these questions, is natural hair isn't a collegiate look. And so then you mark us down in a particular category, such as appearance or such as overall impression or something like that, whatever the score sheet is at the time. And here I have to have a conversation with that this isn't appropriate with my team. And so we could get tired. And so I say this to say, all of that to say, we get tired of fighting it. Dr. Baker and I, we always say that in trainings, especially with our white allies, there has to be some heavy lifting that's not the heavy lifting of Black folks to attack some of these microaggressions. Because the more that we have to keep attacking it and fighting it and fighting it, and our colleagues and our peers aren't fighting alongside us, because maybe they don't know what allyship looks like. Maybe they don't know what solidarity looks like, right? And that's work that we can do together. But the more and more I go into these arenas, specifically in the cheer arena, I'm finding myself fighting more and more of these microaggressions, whether it's me asking a question about a rule clarification, whether it's me asking or challenging a score, whether it's me doing, like, all of those things, it builds up. And here's the other side that I want to add to sort of something I'm saying, and I'm talking very general and then can go specific if anyone has those specific questions, is just because you are Black does not mean that you don't project some of the same microaggressions on each other or yourself or your teammates or your colleagues, right? Because that's how privilege functions, right? If I am a Black person and someone is saying something that's inappropriate, and it's for my benefit because it's inappropriate, whether they're talking about trans lives, whether they're talking about gender things, and I don't say anything, then I am a part of the problem, right? So through microaggressions, when we notice these things, whether it's an inappropriate comment about hair, whether it's inappropriate conversation about dialect and how you talk and how you speak and where you come from, right? We have to challenge those things, because when we don't challenge those things, even with a simple, it is inappropriate to say that, you might not have any other words to say. You might not be able to call it a microaggression. You might not be able to call it racism, sexism. You may not even be able to say colorism, because that's another issue that we can start to dive deeper in, right? Because these things are ever so flowing in our society. We do ourselves a disservice and we do our students a disservice. So every chance that I have, every chance that I get an opportunity to speak against the injustices against any marginalized group, I shall. It might make you feel like you're the odd one in a bunch, because sometimes it's uncomfortable, and many times it's really uncomfortable to have these conversations. But I want people to walk away with this from our panel today with that tangible, that you must do that. Like, that's an action step. You might not have the words, but you must find some words to, when you see those things in acting and playing out, that you speak out against.
So when I was talking to my friend that cheered at Kentucky and a friend of mine that cheered at Connecticut, we judged together for Jam Brands for years, and just we kind of developed like a really close friendship between that. So I know that I can talk to him about anything. You see it now on Twitter, especially with a lot of athletes, and I don't want to pick on Division I coaches, but it's a lot of the Division I teams that are getting the most publicity about how they keep telling their athletes they want an All-American look. And by saying they want an All-American look, they mean an All-American white girl look. And years ago, I had an athlete tell me that they didn't like that description, because I don't mind if I have a Black girl with her natural hair. I think it's beautiful. As long as you can put your hair in a bow if I need you to, you're game day ready. So that's the phrase that I've started using for my athletes is, I need you to look game day ready or athletic, whatever that means to you. Well, I kind of got slapped in the face by my friend that cheered in Kentucky. He's like, why are you separating it? Why is it All-American white, All-American black? Why can't it just be All-American? And our version of that is just an All-American look. So panelists, what do you think about that? I know we've all seen the tweets coming out about our coaches, and it happened here in Iowa with the University of Iowa football team, where a lot of the players came out about the strength and conditioning coach saying they don't understand us. They don't understand what we've been through. We've talked about it a little bit, but talk about more about how these words can harm your relationship with a coach or with an athlete that is hard to get back, if that makes sense.
Well, you talk about the all-American look, and I've been coaching college cheerleading and dance for like 20 some years. Tasha and I have crossed paths at NDA, at Myrtle Beach. And I've coached Division 1A at Virginia Tech and James Madison. And I don't ever remember saying anything about an all-American look. My big thing was collegiate athletic appearance, and that was a big thing for me. And I remember when I started at Virginia Tech, they had, one token black, one token Asian, And then I came in, and in like 2 short years, I mean, they had the most diverse cheerleading team ever. And then they actually got their first black dancer while I was there, which was a huge big deal. And like, I just never looked at color. I looked at the student athlete. I'm like, okay, this is how I need you to look in this uniform. If you don't feel comfortable, let's find something that's going to work for your body size. You know, this is how I would like for everybody's hair to look. I'm not going to tell a girl to go press and process this, that, and the other. You know, let's just find a look that looks good for you. So like I said, I don't ever remember saying anything about All-American. It was just collegiate athletic appearance. And that was my thing.
Well, I know when I listened in to Glenn's, if y'all didn't know, Glenn was on the Black Girls Cheer HBCU coach panel, and it was really great to listen to and hear from all-star athletes also. I think that was the week before. But the week before, they had a lot of all-star athletes who were talking about how coaches made them press or heat their hair, ruined it, or they had to buy wigs, or trying to put their hair in a ponytail to match what the white girls were doing. To me, I don't think there's a place for that. Like you said, Ricky, let's find something that works for you. But you're seeing more and more tweets come out now that the season is over about some of these big name schools who are asking their black athletes to do things that are harming them. I know a lot of people will say it's just hair, but to a female, and hell, to me too, because I don't want to shave my head, but y'all can see my 5 head going on right now. Hair is a big thing to personal identity. And so when you try, I mean, Tasha, Shanitra, what, as a black female who's been in this industry, how did you handle it if a coach asked you to change your hair or wear makeup that didn't work for you or something like that?
I smiled and did it. I think the biggest issue for me growing up was just the tights. And thank God now that there's tights that actually match. But these tan tights, I was like, there's nothing tan. It doesn't look good. I hated it. Or like costumes that were like mock crop tops, but they had like a tan stomach. So like it was tan, but I'm wearing it because there's no, they had no option. So I think that bothered me more than the hair situation. I don't know. My mom kind of was just like, okay, whatever, but the tan tights and all that has always been my number one can't stand situation. But
yeah, mine has been very similar to Tasha. I've always been on teams where like there was an expectation for the way your hair looked, the way your game day face looked, and for the most part, it's just like smile and take it as part of the sport, which I don't think is acceptable. But like that is kind of where the culture was when I was in athletics. I will say though, like when it comes to makeup, trying to find a shade that worked for you, I've always had coaches that were like, okay, well, if this fire red doesn't work for your lipstick, you can do more of a berry. So like there has been some options in that. But also with like tights, I did professional athletics and we had to wear tights, and it was so hard to always find the perfect shade of tights that looked like your legs, but it didn't look like tights. So I feel like that was a bigger struggle even than hair has been for me.
We had a comment from.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to, it actually goes along the line of the comments that are popping up and the perspective of what is professional and what is acceptable in terms of appearance. And so I see Kim has said it too, right? We know that in society as a whole, the discussion around what is professional hair in the workplace has disproportionately negatively impacted Black women. We know that, there's experiences that I've had, right? I have naturally curly hair. When I go for interviews, I'm like, oh, should I straighten it? Should I pull it back in a bun? Will people think, my blonde is grown out because I haven't been to see my hairdresser because we've been locked in the house. But, like, should I have color? Should I not? Right. And one of the things, you know, hearing Tasha and Shanitra saying, I just sucked it up. I just shut up and did what was said, right? And what we know is that's harmful. They are amazing women and we see them on the other side of it. But what we have to realize as well is that while they were experiencing that, young girls now still are. And it doesn't start when we get in college. It starts when we're in K through 12, where we have dress codes that address hair, that address whether we can have braids, what color are in our braids, you know, things like that. And so when we think about natural hair, right? We see laws now, right? California has passed laws and things about natural hair, right? If people have locks versus it being straight, right? How we navigate wigs, things like that. There's this other piece of this as well. And I can speak to it from being a professional, and then I played sports up throughout high school, and being an administrator, right? When I look at the team rules of the programs that we have, and I have to wrap my mind around, coach, why is this a rule? Is this hair in a bun rule because this is how we're scored? Or is this something you've decided, right, that this is appropriate? Is the red lipstick all being the exact red the same? Like, or is it, can I have one because it's got a little undertone of blue and it looks better and it pops better? You know, what those things are, and thinking about how we send those messages of what is professional, what is appropriate, and, you know, in a space like this, what will score you the highest or what may score you lower. If I have, you know, one of the things, you know, we were at tryouts, and, you know, all these girls coming in, hair popping, right? Braids, whatever they're doing. And I'm like, listen, is it a safety hazard? Okay, well, if it's not a safety hazard, what else would the issue be if we say no braids or no this, no that, no natural hair? And so thinking about from an administrator standpoint, how we design our policies, and even from a national level, right? What those score sheets and things look like, because, and I'll finish kind of with this, representation matters. What we have grown up as a society seeing is a blonde-haired, skinny, white cheerleader. That has been what the prototype has looked like. So if we went out and just asked a random person, draw a cheerleader or find a picture of a cheerleader, if there is not representation of cheerleaders that have natural hair, cheerleaders that have dark skin, cheerleaders that are shaped different ways, then we continue to send the message that there is a norm and an appropriateness about what a cheerleader should look like. And when you're not that, instead of accepting who you are, and like Ricky said, listen, let's just find a way to make it work. Come on, let's pull this back. Let's get it in a bun, or let's put the bow. What we said is you must conform. You must adapt who you are and how you look to accommodate everyone else, instead of these individual ways of saying, how do we reach the same goal of uniformity while still allowing you to not feel the pressure of, I have to straighten my hair, or I have to, you know, I can't get my braids. Now, mind you, right, Louisiana, those of you down here in the South, like the humidity is crazy. And braids sometimes that's what we need, right? That's what's going to keep my hair tamed. I don't have to spend 2 hours trying to comb it, brush it, do different things with it. And that also impacts when I'm preparing for a competition and packing to go on the road. I have to think about my hair product. Can I put it on the plane? Can I put it on the bus? Did I bring my brush? Do I have my comb? Because if I am one of the only ones, I can't run to somebody else's room and say, can I borrow this? Because they may or may not have those same products. And so when you think about, again, the representation, asking people to adapt and conform, and I see, you know, folks are saying like, these things start very young. They don't just start when we get to high school. So we have these years and years of being told this is what you should look like. And if you don't ever feel comfortable in that, you may not feel empowered to challenge your coaches, you know, and this is me, the administrator, talking. There are very few athletes who are going to say, coach, nope, that won't work for me. Because we've created a system in athletics where we have power dynamics where we can't challenge our coaches. And the other piece of, and I can't speak, and maybe Shanitra and Tasha can talk about it too, but it takes more time to try to explain to you why I don't feel comfortable and why it's harmful to me than for me to just go pull my hair back and be done with it. And so that's what we've asked many of our students of color to do, is just don't fight the battle. Just go do it. It'll be over after that competition and you can move on. But that's harmful for our students because we're continuing to send these messages that you must conform and you must adapt. And we won't accept who you truly are as a person or in, you know, what your appearance may be.
So going to the comments that have just kind of popped up, Kim said it started for her when she was in private dance studios. So like Dr. Baker was saying, the younger they are, it's kind of like a learned condition that this is what you have to do, like just shove it down and deal with it. She also said when you force a dancer to flat iron her hair because you don't like or don't think natural hair is professional, that's mind-boggling. Even as a big country white boy, I even know that. So that's one of the things that I agree. Jasmine, yes, there are definitely hairstyles that work with both race and can be, you know, work for game day or work for competition and just make sure that you're doing the best. Tony went savage on her professor, I think. She said she danced in college and had a professor who commented on how she was the only one with short hair. And one of the coaches wanted her to wear bright red lipstick, and one game day she smiled and walked out without red lipstick. She did it for her other teammates who had darker skin. I mean, sometimes you have to make that little stand. You have to show them, I'm not one to play with. You tell me this and I don't like it, let's have a compromise. If they don't compromise, you have to go on. We had another question or comment brought up that said, when you have come to a consensus on what the game day, athletic, and then the hair changes, well, today, coach, I can't tumble because of my braids this week. It's the same thing as if, I don't know if any of you have white girls with long hair. I'll let them have we do hair half up, half down. That I just think it looks collegiate. I think it looks good. Sometimes they don't want to tumble because their hair gets stuck in their hands and they feel like they're about to rip their hair out. Okay, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to grab a little hairband. Before you go tumble, you're going to put it on the rest of your hair. That way you can do it. Panel, do y'all have anything to say about how to approach a student who may have had a hair change in between games?
So I'm going to – I'm laughing because at the start of every season, all of them are coming with me with their braids, right? And I'm going to tell you, some of that's excuses, and you have to get past that because you can tumble with braids, right? Now, you might not want to tumble with braids and get your new do messed up and sweaty, but you can tumble with braids, right? And so one of my ultimate things is I tell our athletes, and my entire team this year, this past year, they're Black girls and Black guys, right? If you get a hairstyle that impedes your ability to function, that's your problem. That's not my problem. That's your problem. Because you can tumble with braids. You can do it. Trust me, you can do it. Now, if you want to get your braids all the way down to your kneecaps and then you can't tumble, that's on you. That's an exception. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because Doc hinted on this, and I know some people have probably seen this experiment, was the black doll experiment, where little girls were asked to identify, they were given two dolls, one white, one Black, and then to identify sort of which doll was pretty and which doll was not pretty. And all about 95% of the time, both Black and white girls, little girls, identified the white doll to be pretty. So we asked ourselves, and we asked this question, why is that? Because in our society, we have been conditioned to think that Black is not pretty, right? That goes from skin tone, dark girls not being selected for teams. I've seen that happen. I had a colleague of mine, and I won't name any names because I'm not putting anybody out there, who called me a couple weeks ago and said to me that one of the girls, a Black girl, tried out for her team. Black girl did not make the team. And I said, okay, cool. But the Black girl was calling into question racism, right? That the coach was practicing racist practices, right? So then I asked the coach, I said, so tell me, and Doc and I had talked about this. I was like, whoa, this is really ingrained in people. I said, so tell me, why wasn't she selected? Well, she had the score. So I said, wait a minute. So let's back up. So she had the score. She had the score high enough. She said she had the third highest score because of her tumbling skills. Well, if you don't want to put an emphasis on tumbling with your team, then you need to modify how you are judging your tryouts, right? If you want to have these other elements of collegiate cheer to be weighed more or equitable, such as motion, such as experience, such as can you do the dance, can you do X, Y, and Z, then that's what your tryout score sheet needs to reflect. But if you put an emphasis on tumbling, and this Black cheerleader who had she was a gymnast actually, she had no cheer experience, but she had all the gymnastic elements to make the team. I mean, she was saying she ended all her passes in fulls and things like that. Then you don't select her, but yet she has a score, and your rationale is that because she doesn't have the collegiate look, was the actual words that she used. And again, we're dancing around what the collegiate look is, right? For everybody, because it's different for every single person. And my pushback for this coach was, well, if she made the score, you should have put her on the team, period. That's what it is. Because if she met the mark and the score cut off, then you should have put her on the team because you chose to have your score sheet reflected in this particular way. She didn't choose your score sheet for you. She should have been permitted to be on the team. So this is all ingrained in us. I say this to say, this is all ingrained in us. These microaggressions that we exhibit, all of us have them, right? But we have to be willing and uncomfortable enough to be called on the carpet. And the final thing I will say about this is when we talk about change, and because I really want to drill down these ways in which we can start to navigate to create a more equitable space in cheer and dance. We talk about change at 4 different levels. The personal, who I am, what my values, beliefs, and feelings are about an individual or a group of individuals. I have to change that first. So when we're talking about this cheerleader who was not selected because she didn't fit the collegiate look, that's a me thing. I have to change that. That's personal. That the interpersonal level, the relationship side, the institutional and the cultural level. So we need to be thinking about how we're navigating all of these spaces in those ways. We can set a culture that discriminates and that reinforces these things that we don't want to reinforce.
I think we got into some deep subjects on that one. I'm happy. That was a good discussion.
I want to add one thing real quick, Dax,
okay,
to the conversation as we kind of move and shift on. We talked a lot about like what we don't want to focus on, but like empowering coaches to have these uncomfortable conversations with their athletes is really what needs to happen next. So, hey, as our season's getting started, this is kind of what our look is. Having a conversation where you pull in, hey, I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, but are you comfortable with this style? Or what style are you comfortable with? Let's find some common ground from the beginning of the season so that like your athlete's not blindsided and you're not blindsided when someone walks in with purple hair and you're like, wait, I mean, I didn't say we couldn't have purple hair, but maybe purple hair isn't right for our team as a general. So making sure that you're having those one-on-one conversations is so important. And just being mindful that if they say, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, let's see what other options we have. If all your options don't seem to work with the entire team, all right, this is the option I'm most comfortable with you using as well. And let's work with each other and say, hey, as a team, this is what we've decided to do, and we're going to do that. So just having that discourse that may be uncomfortable for you as an adult is probably uncomfortable for your athlete as well, but it'll just put you in a better situation than we're showing up one day and saying, hey, my braids don't work for like tumbling. All right, well, did we not know this before you got them done? So just finding those areas where we can help them navigate their situation as well.
it comes down to being open to compromise and open to working with each other. We know in our professional life that we have to have a two-way conversation with our colleagues, with our athletic director. We need to have that same respect for our athletes and make sure that we're compromising with them on what we're asking them to do. The next question that was brought up is, I think this is going to be more for Glenn and Dr. Baker probably, but why are HBCUs important to have, not only in the NAIA, but as institutions in general? Do y'all want to take that one right quick?
Yeah, I'll briefly, because I know I really love our last question too. I always want to make sure we have some tangibles to walk away with. And I think, people understanding the history of HBCUs and their existence in general is extremely important. Why these universities were created. They were created because at the time, Black and brown people were not allowed to enroll, right, in these other forms of education that existed around the Civil War, right? Shout out to Lincoln University, which actually was the first HBCU that was started before the end of the Civil War, but majority did come after. And these spaces have played a crucial role in the development of Black and brown students in general, right? Not just student athletes. And so you have HBCUs and then you have minority serving institutions that they've always been these vehicles for liberty and equity and this envisioning of what education could be for people of color, right? In a society and in a country that didn't think enslaved people had the mental capacity to learn, or they didn't have a desire for education, right? These misconceptions that somehow we don't want to learn or we don't have the ability to, we're not capable. And so they've become safe havens. They've become spaces where we're fighting for civil rights, right? We always have. This has been, it's part of most of our missions, this piece of being in a just world, particularly for Xavier, right? We have this vision of just and humane, being in a just and humane society. And so when we're talking about what we're seeing at a national level right now in terms of protest and civil, social injustices and things like that, HBCUs, we've been addressing these issues and we've been nurturing and supporting communities of color that our universities are housed in and well beyond. And, simply the diversity matters, right? We deserve a space to be out there with our teams. We know that. We know that our skill level, our talent level, we can compete. The one thing that I've always said, and Glenn can reflect back on these conversations, when we were initially looking at making this transition from just a game day team to competitive, we were like, wow, there's not, like, in the NAIA, this is new already. Then we're going to introduce this piece of the HBCU team is coming in. And so thinking about how we would be perceived, what did we need to do to prepare? What were the perceptions of our team when we walked into the room? How did we need to come into those spaces to prove that we existed there, that we exist there and that we belong there? And I'm not going to cuss like you, Dex, but I am a cusser. But that we're going to come in and we're going to beat you. We're going to beat your behinds. Like, we're coming to be at the top. We're coming in the score sheet. And we are coming with this skill level, right? And the other piece of this that I know we'll probably touch on with this last question is the holistic development of student athletes and students at HBCUs, right? I want to be very clear. We know that although HBCUs only make up about 3% of the country's colleges and universities, they graduate almost 20% of all African-American students, right? In the STEM field, nobody can touch us, right? We are sending students to areas of the STEM field more than the majority of PWIs are. Now, obviously, enrollment numbers matter, things like that, but they have been environments and spaces of developing cultural understanding and nurturing and civil rights and challenging the norms. And in many ways, introducing ourselves into cheer in a way that we have, we continue to do that. Being empowered, walking in knowing, I went to our very first competition. When you walk in the gym, everybody's heads turn. There is no secret when you walk in the gym with an all-black team that the whole gym is looking your way. I think they think we don't see it, but we see it. You feel it, right? You feel it when you walk in. You want to look good. You want to be representative of your university and proud, but the eyes are on you. And so that's another piece of what we've done, and what I know Kim is on the call. She's our associate athletics director and sports supervisor for Cheer Now. That is what's important, right? We empower these young women to walk into spaces where I don't know what the judges are going to say about you today. I really don't. But what we've prepared for, let's go handle it on the mat, and let the score sheet be what it is. Let Coach Glenn handle if he has to, petition, advocate, stomp his foot, whatever. But knowing that we belong in these spaces and we're coming for all of you, right? So we're the competition as well. We're not this team that's going to come in and be like, oh, well, they just showed up. And so that's another piece of development of these young women and young men on our team, that everyone's watching you. And you're representing an amazing institution. So let's go to work. And that's what we come to do. And, that's why it's also important, that representation piece. Little girls and little boys should see cheerleaders that are people of color, that are tumbling all across the floor, that are throwing up in the air, that are in pyramids, that are, doing all these stunts. They should see that, because they can be that. Whether it's in our spaces at HBCUs or at the PWIs, Division I, NAIA, NCAA, whatever it may be, right? But they need to see that. They need to see that it exists. And if you've ever had a chance to see a group of little Black girls come around a group of cheerleaders in a gym, we have some of the most amazing pictures, because they walk in and they're like, oh, look at them. They look like me. And they have these amazing skills. I can do that. I can be that. And I think that's extremely important, and why on a national level, that representation does matter.
I mean, I'm an old head. I am. And I remember the cheer scene, and as much as I hate the movie and as wholly as inaccurate as it is, I think there was more Black athletes started cheering after Bring It On happened, and they saw the Clovers. I honestly, that's when I think everything started to amp up for our Black athletes. They saw people on a national movie, flipping, like you said, doing the flips, doing the baskets, tumbling, stunning, winning. And I know, especially for, when we talk about LGBTQ IAA plus people, seeing the representation in movies and TV, it helps the little kids see someone that's like them and know that it's going to be okay. I can do this. And especially when you're talking about college cheerleading, especially at the NAIA level, where we have scholarships that we can help individuals from all socioeconomic backgrounds, kids who are first generation college students, kids who come from a situation where they might not have both parents. They might be living with a grandparent. They might have never thought college was an option, but because they can cheer, they can tumble, they can stunt, you can go to college and get it paid for. You can get that degree. You can, I don't want to say change your situation, but you can do things you never thought of. And that's one thing that sports does for everyone, is guide you to where you want to be in the future. And so I know we had a question, and Ricky, you may want to answer this one because it might be in your realm, is how do you recruit Black athletes to cheer and dance? Because this was asked by one of our D1A coaches, and right now out of the board, I think you're the only one with D1A experience. But how do you recruit Black athletes to like a Division I PWI to come and cheer or dance for you?
Well, I know like at Virginia Tech, I had a lot of connections, and I did a lot of choreography and judged a lot of competitions. So that's where I got the connections, like with Crimson Heat and Veronica. A lot of the teams up in Washington, D.C., up in Upper Marlboro in Maryland. So it was just cultivating friendships, going and watching competitions. And when I saw a kid, I would go up to the coach and go, hey, my name is Ricky Hill. I coach at Virginia Tech. We don't have any athletic scholarships, but I would love to have your kid on my team. Here's some information about our program. I invite you to come down for a game, for a practice. And that's how it all happened. And I think the other thing with why I got so blessed to have so many people of color was because I was the first Black coach there for cheer and dance. And I guess once the Black kids, people of color, the Asian kids, the Hispanic kids, once they saw me on the sideline dressed up and coaching and doing my thing, they're like, okay, well, now maybe I do have a shot. Let me go try this. Let me see if I can do this. I think that played a lot in my success. So, but then, like I said, it's all about cultivating relationships and reaching out to these gym owners and these high schools, and going to practice, going to the competitions. That's what it's about, and that's what helped me.
So I don't, unfortunately, have very many Black or brown athletes on my team right now because I'm a small private Catholic institution that's expensive to go to. But one thing I'm doing to try to rectify that is I'm doing stunt clinics and camps with schools that may be in a very highly Black populated area. And I'm doing these for free because I can go and reach out to these athletes and, I get my name, they deal with me, they work with me. I treat them just like I would my kids. I mean, I'm laughing with them, I'm joking with them, I'm breaking down technique with them. And they know that when they get ready to go to college that I'm already looking at them, I already know them. And they have that familiarity with me. And I think, honestly, the big thing with kids now, that because at NAIA, we do recruit. A lot of us don't really have tryouts. We recruit our athletes. We sign them just like your football coach does, your basketball coach does. We're watching tapes. We're going to competitions. We're having clinics that we can. And one of the main things that kids like is that they know you. And if you can get out in front of them and do things like that, even like maybe not do it for free, but maybe do it for like half price, because you're going to have coaches from larger institutions that are like, oh yeah, I'll come and do a stunt clinic. It's $3,000. Yeah, I'll come and choreograph your routine. It's $3,000. But if you just go, hey, listen, if y'all need any help with stunting or with maybe a halftime routine or something, let me know. I'll be more than glad to come out and help you. And make that connection with the coach. That gets you in with the kids. And then if they see, this coach from the University of Arkansas came and helped us, and we went from doing preps to doing libs in one day, they're going to think about you when they start their college decision and say, you know what, I can cheer or I can dance at that college. I had, oh my gosh, I had Tasha from Oklahoma City come and teach me how to do alsacones, and she made them perfect. And they're going to remember that. And so I think that goes for athletes of any color. That goes for any recruiting. You have to get your name, you have to get your likeness, and you have to build that reputation. Like Ricky said, you just have to cultivate those friendships.
Yeah, and like it also goes back to champions of character with the NAIA. Going into these schools or these rec programs, that's community service. That's community outreach. You're getting yourself out there, putting your name out there so that, and, inviting them to come to the games. That's helping. That's cultivating more relationships.
Shanitra, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did. I just want to say, like, being intentional every year about what where you're looking to recruit and how you're recruiting, and not getting stuck in your status quo. Like, hey, I always get an athlete from here. All right, those are the easy recruits, the ones that come year after year because you've already cultivated those relationships. With saying, like, Kate Edge and I will go through it each year and we'll say, all right, we need 5 of this style. We need 5 tumblers. We need 5 back spots, whatever. All right, how can we make our team the most diverse team on our campus? That's the biggest thing that we always focus on, is trying to be one of the most diverse teams on our campus. And I think it needs to be an institutional push, not just your team push. You need to know that your institution is supporting you in diversity, because not just offering a diverse spot on your team for an athlete is not enough. Like, having a seat at the table is not enough if they don't have a voice. So once they get to your university, what are we doing to support them? If they've never been to a college, if they are a first generation student, like, how are they going to be supported once they're there? Like, it's not enough to just bring them in. So being intentional about that. One thing that we're doing at Concordia, we do solely recruit, but our university just started a limited potential scholarship. With that scholarship, we can have up to 20 student athletes, or students separate as well. So there's 20 and 20. And once they've had a max of all their loans, and if they have any, a 0 family contribution, whatever additional they would normally have is waived. So then their deposit is waived, registration fees are waived, and it kind of gives them just a step ahead that you wouldn't normally get if you are struggling with your social economic standing, or with any of those other things. It really does offer an opportunity for students who do meet some of those other criteria, like meeting their academic rigors, and those opportunities that you may not traditionally have if you're a student of color from not a privileged background.
So I think this is going to lead us into our next question. There are 23 HBCUs in the NAIA. If you want to know who those are, trust me, I found a picture that listed every HBCU in every sport division. It didn't have the names, so I had to, like, go through the list of NAIA schools, go through the sport logos, and try to figure out who was what. But I have those written down. But there are 4 HBCUs in the NAIA who sponsor cheer dance, and those are Florida Memorial, Talladega, Tougaloo, and Xavier University. But what can be done to increase the amount of diversity in cheer and dance? And this is on any level. So, I mean, what Shanitra just said, you're over here. What Shanitra just said is being intentional when you recruit, I think, is the big one. Is there anything else that you guys can think of?
I would add, and this is the heavy work and the hard work that sometimes I know you all as coaches experience, the amount of resources that we are allocating. And so I don't know if there's any athletic directors or administrators on the call, but something that from my perspective, when we're talking to leadership in athletics, resources matter for all of our programs. And there's traditionally always been hierarchies of who receives what money and how many scholarship dollars, but finding the way that's realistic and reasonable and within the scope of advocating for your program. When you think about going and recruiting, if you don't have a recruiting budget, and again, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, because I know, you all already know this, but when we're in the room with athletic directors, if you're not going to give your cheer coach or your dance coach resources to go recruit, what do you expect them to do? They're going to stay local. They're going to stay close. And this is why I always joke, like, presidents of universities are probably like, don't even bring her around, because she's going to be in here begging and beating down the door for money for these other programs. But the reality is that if you're not going to invest the resources, right, invest the resources in the recruiting dollars, in the operating budget, salaries, right? This is important too. There are a number of coaches that I know across the country, and this is, NAIA is a piece of this too. This is like part-time, or this is side hustle money. These aren't always full-funded, full-time opportunities, but we're expecting to see Dax. I see you. Listen.
Yeah, you taking us to church. You are taking us to church right now. I'm about ready to pass the plate. I'm about ready to
I'll give you
get
my cash app. I got you.
Oh, I get that cash out. We about to pass the plate. She preaching.
But it is, it's finding the way to advocate for your program, and it's not easy. It is very tricky because right behind you is the basketball coach, the soccer coach, the tennis coach, whoever it may be, and they're asking for resources too. But that commitment to being able to recruit, to go to different competitions, to be able to, bring students in, that matters in how we diversify a sport or these sports like cheer and dance. If I can't let my coaches go recruit, you all are just sitting behind, laptops like, well, I guess I'll just watch this little bit of film. And of course, I'm going to send you my best film. I'm going to send you my best skills. I don't ever make mistakes on my film. But I do think that that's important in terms of the amount of resources. And I bring this up as well from a gender equity standpoint. The resources we are putting into our men's sports, we need to put into our women's and our co-ed, because that impacts the ability to recruit for those programs, the exposure that those programs have. Your sport communication people, your pictures should be up on the front, on the home page, right? When we have a competition, put my story first. And however that politically happens on your campus, if you're a football school, different story, right? You may be fighting those battles, but the exposure, the resources, all of these things matter when you look at growing this sport. And it's a major conversation for, particularly like in our conference. So we're in the GCAC, all of our schools are HBCUs, and these conversations that have been happening are, well, are you going to put money in your cheer programs? If you want them to go to nationals, we have to be able to get there. We can't get on a megabus. We want to travel there safely, quickly. We don't want to take 3 stops on the way, but those things matter. And that's another piece of, it's above the coaching level in a sense of how administrators are making decisions. But as, a national organization and DAX, as a president of this, that is where some of these pushes have to happen, and where that voice matters at the national level to say, listen, we started it. Let's support it. Let's fund it. Let's do what we need to do to make sure we can continue to grow and have the exposure to be able to recruit in the same way and have these strong programs like many of the other teams on our campuses have.
So Kim just made a good point. She said she's in a senior leadership role, and it isn't always easy articulating the importance of having equivalent resources for cheer and dance as we do for other sports to leaders who don't understand, and that was in bold, so she was preaching that one, who don't understand what's required to have a successful dance or cheer team and program. So we have a new, we have our National Advisory Council for the NAIA, and we all have a sport liaison. Our new sport liaison is the athletic director at Oklahoma City University. I had a 2-hour conversation with him last Friday about him taking over the role and us working together. And one thing he said, Tasha, this is going to make you happy. Trust me. One thing he said is that when schools contact me about adding cheer and dance as a sport, I tell them, if you're not willing to invest in the program, it is going nowhere. And for our liaison who talks to all the other athletic directors of the NAIA, to have that mentality when dealing with my coaching body, that is exciting for me, because that's someone who actually understands that if you're, as an NAIA sport, if you're going to add cheer and dance as a varsity sport, you have to realize we need mats, because to host a competition, we have to have mats. Thank you, Siobhan. We have to have judges. We have to have a DJ. We have to have a space for practice. And if you're not going to let your teams have this, then why are you starting the sport? Keep it as a sideline. And so Mr. Jim Abbott, who is our new liaison, Oklahoma City, like I said, I grew up outside of Little Rock. I've known about the Oklahoma City cheer and dance team for God, it feels like 30 years now, because of how they are known, used to be known on the NCAA national scene in Daytona, because there wasn't a year that one of the Oklahoma City teams didn't take home a title. And it starts with that leadership to say, I'm going to invest in this program. And that's how you get a program like that. And so to have a leader who's working with this National Advisory Council, who programs are successful, who knows his programs are successful and can help other teams get that money they need to put in, I'm so excited. And when, Dr. Baker, when you're saying, you know, that's the push we need on the national level, we actually have it in NAIA because he's pushing that. Anybody else have anything to add?
I know, like, when I interviewed for the position here at Loyola, I did ask Brett, do you really understand what you're getting yourself into? Do you understand the cost? Yeah, and he's like, well, yeah, I do. I'm like, well, okay. So when I came in, you know, they'd purchased the floor, which was great. And then it was time to order practice gear and uniforms. And, you know, when I had to present what I wanted for a uniform, he looked at me, he goes, that top and that skirt cost $150? I don't get it. The basketball jerseys don't cost that much. I'm like, polyester is expensive. Those letters across that top are expensive. Those shoes are.
What can be done to increase the amount of diversity? Like how do we intentionally get the diversity? And I think we've covered it, but just Dr. Baker, or Glenn, go ahead. One quick sentence.
No, so quickly, when we first came into the NAIA, and I made this suggestion, I didn't know where to schedule a competition. Ricky was the one who told me about the Facebook group, so I joined that, saying maybe I'll get some more information. He's like, you're going to be okay. He just kept telling me I was going to be okay, which I'm okay. But I think, like, as we're thinking through, like, diversity, specifically with people who haven't, NAI is different, right? It's not like any other. It's not like we go on a website and we register for our competition, we show up, right? It's different in those ways. So my suggestion as we think through not just bringing in more HBCUs into the pot is, how do we have think partners on new programs that can help us integrate into the NAIA cheer division? So I called my colleagues already at Tougaloo, and we've now scheduled weekly meetings so that I can tell Dr. Harris, okay, so this is what you need to do. So that she has someone to be a partner as she's going through the season, so that when that question does come up about where do I submit my outline and things like that I had, she has someone that she knows is an ally right now. So we've been developing those relationships. But my suggestion is, let's start to think about whether there's modules or anything like that we can sort of roll out to help people get a better understanding of what this is for both athletic directors, but also for coaches. Let's continue to have these dialogues, these town halls, so that we can bring more people into the NAIA.
Nice. And that's one thing I'm trying to do with this coaches series, is walk new coaches through how we do our outline, how we do that. So I'm really excited about this month of July that we've put together. Okay, so now we're going to get to the question that Dr. Baker has been itching her palms for. I think it's the last one that you're wanting. I'm not for sure. What are some ways that coaches can educate themselves on the experience of student athletes of color?
That's my favorite one. You know it is.
That's why I said that. I was building you up.
I promise I'll be so quick. I'm gonna be quick. So I think educating ourselves individually, right? One of the things we talked about before was around having this understanding, knowing the language, I really encourage coaches, when we specifically talk about student athletes of color, regardless of the sport, understanding what their experiences are on campus, navigating the world, those things matter in terms of building your relationship with them as a coach. And so not putting the heavy lifting on them to teach you everything about them, right? My word of wisdom is, do not ask the Black and brown students to be responsible for educating you on everything you should know about the Black and brown experience. You should listen to them. You should ask them questions. You should engage in dialogue, but you also should do some background work as well, right? Read about what's happening with student athletes. There's some amazing scholars out there. There's some amazing authors. There's resources available that help you understand what is it like navigating this world as a student of color, as a person of color in general. It not only helps you with your student athletes, it helps you with your colleagues, right? With your leadership, whatever that may look like. And so it might be the form of a podcast. It might be these, think tanks where you log into, there's 1,000,001 webinars every day, right? But reading about the Black athlete experience, what students of color are experiencing before they get to your campus. The same way, and I say this all the time, the same way you study your sport and you educate yourself on your sport, educate yourself on your student athletes. And again, it doesn't just limit, right, to students of color. This is, to me, successful coaches understand their athletes. They know how to motivate their athletes, and they form very positive relationships with their athletes, because when you have that relationship, you can pull things out of people that a stranger could never get out of, particularly an athlete. But understanding what it feels like to navigate the campus as a Black student, right? You'll never be able to know what that feels like if you're not a student of color, but reading about, hearing about, listening to, when they express concern, right? When the Shanitras of your team come to you and say, Coach, I don't feel comfortable with this. Instead of immediately shutting down, help me understand why you don't feel uncomfortable. And then being able to reflect on yourself of what role have I played maybe in making this student uncomfortable? What control do I have to make this environment or this space more welcoming, more inclusive? And so I think the education piece, and I have some resources, Dax, I'll make sure I send them over. If it means bringing in some outside people to talk with your team, doing team building, that stuff is important. I'm sure, Shanitra knows this on campus as working in a multicultural center. Sometimes that outside voice is helpful to come in and have that discussion and to be a part of those conversations. So that would be, that's my 3-minute quick version of some of the things to do. And I know Shanitra probably has so much more to add too.
Dr. Baker, you hit the nail on the head. Was just talking about the education and like creating and cultivating relationships that are intentional with our student athletes. And that's all our student athletes, especially our student athletes of color. Like, the questions that we should be reflecting on every day is, what relationship do I have with my athletes? What experience are they having? And are they comfortable talking to me about those experiences? I had the pleasure of creating and facilitating, we called it the Winter Off Community Conference. And every one of our faculty, every one of our staff, from the president of our staff to our janitorial services, all got in one room together, and we had a conversation about diversity inclusion. And one thing that was so powerful for us is, and we went back and forth about it, is we had a panel of our students of color, and that was multiple students of color, and they talked about their experience at a predominantly white institution. And to say it was like impactful and powerful would be an understatement. Like, they were really worried at first, like, what would faculty say? What would our president say? And, really those conversations were like, those are power roles for a student to come in and stand in front of a panel of the people who control their entire fate and talk openly and honestly about their experience was something that is unique, and most institutions haven't facilitated that for their students. But that's where the real conversations happen. We took 2 months where I sat down with these 5 students, and one was a graduate student as well. And we talked about, what was your experience before you got here, and what has your experience been here, and what do you need to see? Because as staff and faculty of institutions, we may have one perception of what our students want, but that may be completely different than what they actually want to see, and how we can actually support them on their level with their experiences. So to be able to sit down and have this conversation with them that was so raw, of them talking about what their experience is as a Black student or a student of color in general was absolutely amazing. And if there are opportunities where coaches or staff members can facilitate things of that magnitude, I think it's just so powerful to speak on what that experience would be. And if you're not in that setting where that's something that your institution can do, doing it at your level, how can you impact your students? What are they saying to you, and what are you bringing to them?
Guys, this has been amazing. I know I've learned a lot. Like I said at the beginning, I think a lot of the issues in the world right now are because people do not take the time to actively listen to other people. We are so, like I said, we are so quick to throw our opinions, our perceived facts, the way we believe on someone else, that we're not willing to take the time to sit down and listen to what someone else has experienced. Because all the memes that have been going on since the unfortunate death of George Floyd and during the Black Lives Matter, there was one that said, I may not have walked a mile in your shoes, but I can lace up mine, hold your hand, and walk with you. That's the energy that we need to take with our athletes. We may not know what they have been through, but we can hold their hand. We can consensually give them a hug so that we're not violating Title IX. I try the consensual word. I've watched Consent and Tea. I know what we're doing. But just being there to listen, have your ears open, your heart open, and be able to not just say, oh, well, you grew up in this situation. That must have been hard. I'm going to walk away from you. It was, tell me, what have you experienced that has made that I can do, and I can change my words to make a better relationship with you. Because I think as coaches, our biggest thing we need to do is foster a relationship with every athlete, because we are their crazy uncle or crazy aunt away from home when they're on our teams. We have told their parents we're going to take care of them. And that's just not their body. That's their mind too. That's their mental health. That's their mental well-being. So we need to be really cognizant of what we say and how we talk to athletes. I didn't want to talk as much. I'm glad that we got everything we needed to say. I told my panel I didn't want to talk a lot, but I did, and I'm sorry. But I want to leave with a couple of things. I want to leave everybody with a couple of things tonight before we go. And if my panel can hang out as soon as we leave, just a second, that would be nice. I want to reread the quote that I started the night with, and I want you to go and think about what we have talked about with these shared experiences with Shanitra, Tasha, Glenn, Ricky, Dr. Baker, everything they've said. The only thing that should come after I'm not racist, but racism is so ingrained in my society and culture that on some level I definitely am, and need to do my part to destroy the system of oppression that people like me have created and benefit on the daily. Now, there are several different ways you can take this, whether it be hair, whether it be I can drive a car without being scared I'm going to be stopped, whether it's I'm not going to have to worry about some crazy lady yelling at me because I took the last orange because she doesn't like the way I look. That quote really hit home to me, and that, if you can't tell, it really affected a lot of the way I think. The other thing I want to leave you with is something that Shanitra said in our email chain that we have. And it was her thoughts on what this panel would be like and what she wanted from it. And I couldn't have put it into better words. She said, "It is my hope that coaches leave this discussion empowered and interested in self-reflection, program reflection, and ready to do the work needed to prepare for their students' welcome back on campus after such a time of social unrest. If coaches can leave with the idea of what more can we do, that is the first step to cultivating a diverse and inclusive environment." And honestly, there is no better way to end this than with that statement. If you're not ready to do the self-reflection or the program reflection that you need to do to make sure that every single one of your athletes has the same experience, then you might need to spend some time in meditation or prayer or whatever you do. But I want to thank everybody for coming. My NAIA coaches, my NCAA coaches, Kim, leadership role. I honestly think that this has been a great conversation. I think we can continue this on throughout the year. Not just talking about our Black and brown athletes, but like I said, talking about our LGBTQIAA plus athletes that may be on a religious campus. Religion. I know a university was having an issue with a athlete who was afraid of doing things because of their religion, so we can cover that. International students in our programs, we can cover what they face being people of color and being international, especially in the climate we have in America today. But this is just the first step of opening dialogues, and I'm so glad that y'all came along for this ride with me, because I learned a lot of stuff when I was doing my research. I learned a lot of stuff from talking to my panel individually. And coaches that are in here, I really hope that you learned something and you're taking away something for your programs. And that's it. Thank you for everybody that came. I think I have this recorded. I'm not for sure. We're going to cross our fingers, but I'm not the best with technology. I know how to hit a button and go. But if my panel can stay around for just a second, everyone else, you're free to go. So guys, how do we think it went?
I think it was great.
Yeah, I thought it went great.
That was really great.
I just had a big sigh of relief.
If you, hey Dax, wait really quick. If you want to